Yes, the Kursk submarine. What's interesting is that, as you read in Red November, many years ago, I was on a submarine, the USS Drum, and we were about a mile off the coast of Vladivostok doing a mission. And we miscalculated and came up underneath a Soviet Victor 3 submarine, smashed our entire sail. We had floodings, damage, some injured people. And they chased us for 3 days. They had the right to, and they were firing torpedoes at us, dropping depth charges. And most of us didn't think we were going to make it back alive. And so when I heard about the Kursk in August of 2000, all those memories came back. And I never really knew what PTSD was until that day. And I couldn't sleep for a week. Even though they used to be enemies, I had an affinity. All of us submariners feel an affinity to our fellow bubbleheads, as we call them. But when I heard the news reports, guys, I knew they were not telling the truth. We were getting fed a pack of lies. And I think most people wouldn't know this, but having been on these ops, very clear to me that what we were being told was cover up. And the Russians and the U.S. were covering up. I knew we had two submarines, the Memphis and Toledo, very nearby on station, and later talked with some of the submariners on there. But it took me 20 years to get people to come forward and talk and tell the truth. And that's what's in Spies of the Deep.
Nice. So the Kursk was interesting because, well, there's several reasons. One, I think it's interesting because it was Putin had just came into power then, right? That was the beginning of 2000.
That's correct, March 2000. Now, what's interesting is that in August of 99, the Kursk went on a top secret mission and got very close to an aircraft carrier we've heard about in the news recently because of COVID. And that's the Theodore Roosevelt. They got a firing solution on that aircraft carrier, and none of our ASW planes or ships could find it. So they came back to fanfare. Putin met with the captain of that sub and then went down to the pier. And Putin's father was a submariner, by the way, and he became an honorary submariner. But he used that to propel himself from only 2% of the vote, according to the polls, to 53% of the vote in March of 2000. So the Kursk submarine mission success really helped propel him to power. And then when the Kursk went down, that's when when Putin was in a lot of trouble, but he found a way out and used that to actually ignite his presidency.
So the Kursk, the official story is that it was an accident, right? It sunk as during a military exercise they were holding. I forget what the sea is called there, up off Murmansk to the north. And you don't want to spoil your book.
Correct.
The Bering Sea, there you go. We don't want to spoil your book too much, but then you believe that this was more than just an accident, right?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. What happened was in January, February of that year, we sent a former naval officer, Edmund Pope, to Russia. And he was tasked with getting top secret information, plans and so forth on a new rocket torpedo called Shkval. Could hit 200 knots underwater, 4 times faster than our Mark 48s.
Yeah, super cavitating.
Super cavitation, exactly. It's like a force field in front of the nose, if you will, of this thing. And he failed. And 8 days after Putin came to power, Putin had him thrown into jail. It was the first arrest of that nature since the 50s. So now we're desperate. NSA, NSG desperate. They talk to the CEOs of the Toledo, Memphis, and say, you've got to get in really close to the Kursk because they're going to test fire the Shkval, and we must get readings on this. We don't know anything about it. That's what happened. So they told us it was an old, antiquated torpedo, a fat girl, they called it. I prove almost definitively in the book it's not. No way. Experts said no way. It was a Shkval, and one of our submarines, most likely the Toledo, either scraped the bow of the Kursk or got too close, made it suddenly move, wedged the Shkval in the torpedo tube, and then lit off, blew off the back door of the torpedo tube, and ignited the other torpedoes, blew up the entire front end of the Kursk.
Wow.
Now, torpedoes, they have safety measures where they're not supposed to just go off, right? Or, well, this was also Russia, when they were not doing very well, economically. So were there just safety lapses and stuff that they did not have these safety devices in place, or they're not very well taken care of to not go off like that?
Well, that's true for an ordinary torpedo, but this was a rocket torpedo, and so it did have a flaw. And that's what was discovered. I actually interviewed some experts who talked to the Russians, and I talked to some of the Russians as well. And what happened was there's a firing mechanism on this torpedo. It's a rocket. And once that is, if you will, ignited, the firing mechanism, if the torpedo does not launch from the tube, it will ignite. That's a flaw that was later corrected, but at that time it wasn't. And so it lit off because it got wedged in the tube.
Huh. And so were they getting ready to shoot it? Like, I don't understand how it got wedged in the tube. Like, can you describe that a little bit? Like, was it protruding out of the tube? Like, I don't understand. Maybe you can kind of help us out a little bit.
All right. So picture a torpedo inside of a torpedo tube. And if it's aligned correctly in the tube, then with the outer door opened, it will just fire its way out. But if it gets moved in some way, tilted to one side or the other, then it will get wedged, meaning that it's no longer able to get out of the tube. It's stuck inside the tube.
Right.
And that's what happened. So because it moved to the left or right enough to where it couldn't cleanly get out of the tube, so it got stuck in there, and that's when it blew up.
Oh, so you think it was like a hot run? So they had a small collision, they couldn't get out, they had a hot run in the tube.
Correct. So it's similar to a hot run, but once you've basically turned on the ignition for this thing, it's a firing mechanism on the torpedo itself that once you kick that into gear, after a certain period of time, it's assuming that it's out of the tube. And it didn't have a way to verify that it was out of the tube before the rocket engine lights off. The rocket engine is not supposed to light off until it's out of the tube.
Right.
But it didn't know any better because it got stuck in the tube, and that's when the rocket engine lit off.
Right.
And that blew off the back door to the torpedo tube. And with the front door open, now you've got flooding, but you've also got this jet fire streaming out the back, and that cooked off the other torpedoes and blew them up.